Welcome to Keep Trucking Personal, where we invite you to explore the heart and soul of our company, Kivi Brothers Trucking. Through engaging storytelling, insightful market updates, and vibrant energy, our podcast reflects our culture, values, and achievements. Whether you're a team member or industry enthusiast, join us to build connections, foster growth, and inspire excellence. Discover why we're more than just a company. We're a community, a catalyst for positive change, and a home for those aspiring to be part of something extraordinary. The pre-trip is complete and engines ready. We're set to hit the road on the Keep Trucking Personal podcast. Let's go.
Welcome to Keep Trucking Personal. My name is Tyler Kivi and I'm your host. Today we have a guest that is part of our heavy haul department. He's got a great story to tell. Aidan Skelly, welcome.
Thank you.
How you doing today, Aidan?
I'm doing pretty good. We're just taking an easy day here.
I love what you get to do as part of our heavy haul department, and some of that yesterday is kind of unique. Why don't you tell us what you were doing just yesterday? Because it's kind of a cool application being in a port next to a ship and unloading that ship specifically.
Yeah, so I got really fortunate to be chosen to go down and help offload a ship that was full of wind turbines, which afforded me first opportunity to play around with the Goldhofer trailer. It was very unexpected, kind of last minute. Basically what they had us doing was we were just making a loop out of the port from one side where they've got the ship docked. They're taking all the nacelles, the hubs, and then the actual gearboxes off the vessel. And then we're just looping them out on the road, turning into the next lot. And we got Lakehead Construction there with other cranes. They're craning everything off. And we're just getting it ready to get transported over to the rail side. So they could ship that up to Canada here in the future.
Every time I've ever been to a port, whenever you can get next to a ship or have that, like you said, opportunity to be involved in it, it's kind of like a feather in your hat. You feel like you're really accomplishing a lot because you're just in the mix, especially on the grand scale, right? Unloading a ship that came from Europe or wherever that specific cargo ship came from.
Yeah, it's definitely a unique thing. I think one of the nice things too working there is being that it's the Port of Duluth, it's a lot friendlier, a lot less congested. You know everyone that's working there pretty quick. It's not like going out to the Port of Baltimore or somewhere that's a lot bigger, where it's super, super fast paced and you can't really keep up with what they're trying to have you do.
It's that relationship game. Once they get to know you, you get to know them. They can already expect, well, Aidan's going to be right here, parked right here. He knows how to chain this, that. Makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's honestly one of the things I value the most about being local regional is the fact that like everything is a partnership direct with our customers. We're always working with the same people, which I really appreciate. And
that's how we built our heavy haul division, was truly that do well for one customer, and customer A talks to customer B, hey, these guys have succeeded on delivering this very promptly, and then you do it again and you do it again, and pretty soon it's very relationship driven. They call and request the same driver often. Hey, can we get this driver because he knows the job site or he knows how to run our equipment, which is a unique position to be in with some of this equipment they have.
I'm kind of surprised by that. I didn't realize that when I moved over to heavy haul that was going to be the case. And I'd heard people talk about the fact that they get called back all the time as a specific driver. And it wasn't until the first time that I got requested back on something that I was like, oh, this is kind of a unique situation. The fact that I have that direct relationship with a customer that they want me specifically to be there. That was kind of a really eye-opening moment as far as customer service was concerned.
Yeah, you don't believe that it's to the finest little detail. And sometimes it's the finest detail with the biggest equipment. They're looking for that, right? And they also have to respect that their equipment can be valued at $1 million. So when they trust somebody such as yourself, they want that, they feel comfortable again.
Yeah, they absolutely want someone that can have that trust and integrity with, that they know that if something happens, you're going to be honest about it, that you'll be truthful in the matter, and someone that they just know in general isn't going to have those problems. But, like I said, when something comes up, that they can trust you to be honest about everything that's happened with their equipment.
Well, I definitely know you do a great job there. Why don't you tell us just about you getting into trucking? I think that's always a unique thing, and I want to hear how you got into trucking.
Yeah, so I kind of got in a roundabout way. I actually was in college at the time for law enforcement here in Cloquet, Minnesota, right down the road from our yard, and decided to join the Minnesota Army National Guard. And I actually had a contract signed and everything as a 15 Quebec. So I was actually supposed to be air traffic control. And I waited around for the better part of a year to ship out to basic training because they were trying to line up basic and AIT at the same time and make sure that I could be a direct ship all through. And about a month before I shipped out, I got a call that I need to go down to AirCav in St. Paul, get a flight physical essentially from them, even though I didn't actually need that. And when I did that, I had a vision waiver for my contract at the time. And when I went in, my vision waiver got pulled and they told me I could no longer have that MOS as a 15 Quebec. So I ended up looking with my recruiter to see what I could do that was going to have me back in college on time for my semester. So I ended up shipping out and becoming an 88 Mike out of Duluth, Minnesota. So I joined the 114th Transportation Company and was part of the 347th Regional Support Group. That got me my introduction into driving basically PLSs, so the 5-axle hook arm trucks that the military has.
Mm-hmm.
Driving those on and off. And the George Floyd situation started kicking off and my health was taking a bit of a turn and made it not really seem like law enforcement was really the route for me at the time. And talked to my platoon sergeant a bunch, went back and forth, and we decided that I should probably, look into at least temporarily, taking on trucking on the civilian side. So went over to Lake Superior College, did their civilian program, spent 5 weeks there. Kind of had a self-starter situation. I knew a little bit about driving from the military, but I didn't really, have a background in over-the-road trucking. So I ended up working for Home Depot through XPO Logistics for a couple of years. So it started out in tail end of 2017 was when I got my license. Actually, that kind of an odd situation. I didn't even have my license yet, and I had the contract for the job, which was I had a certificate from Lake Superior College basically saying I could get my Class A endorsement, and talked my way into a job that I really wasn't qualified for at the time. And I immediately went over to the DBS here in Minnesota, got the Class A endorsement applied, and was renting a car the same day to go pick up the tractor that was going to be used for that account down in Missouri. So with no real experience at all, I jumped in a rental car, drove down to Missouri, picked up a tractor, brought it back on my own, did that contract for a couple of years. During that time, I ended up still in the National Guard. My health continued to kind of take a worse turn. I didn't think I was actually going to be able to keep trucking because I had ulcerative colitis. So I had inflammation of my intestines, basically. July of 2019, actually ended up collapsing out of Camp Ripley and had GI surgery. So that was an eye-opening situation for me as far as like my future was concerned. I couldn't really continue doing what I was doing in the flatbed world. A surgeon basically told me that for the foreseeable future, I had to give up what I was doing, and talked for a minute with the surgeon about what I could do. Decided to go over the road and do drive in for a moment, just because that was what was going to work for me.
Yeah, just because of the physical side?
Yeah, so after the surgery, I still had stitches in and everything, and they didn't want me to do that. So I ended up going to Revell Trucking, actually, out of McGregor. One of my sergeants in the National Guard, his stepdad owns the company.
Okay.
Didn't know that at the time, actually. I found that out after I'd hired on with them. So I did that for, I think I was there 4 to 6 months, and really got burned out on the dry van world really fast. It was not for me. It wasn't my kind of situation in life. It wasn't keeping me engaged at all. Waiting around at docks and whatnot just, wasn't something that clicked with me. So I actually ended up on a load coming out of Chicago, or the suburbs of Chicago, and I happened to see a Kivi truck sitting at one of the Oasis, coming right out of Chicago there, and had a load of Caterpillar skid steers on, which I'm pretty sure were coming out of Athens, Georgia at the time. And I was looking at that, and it was one of the Heritage Edition Pete's, and I was like, man, that's pretty fly. I need to be driving one of those trucks. This is way cooler than the Volvo I'm driving, and chatted with the driver for a moment, and didn't catch his name, but we just talked about what he did and what it was like working for Kivi. And, I wasn't actually sure if I had the qualification because I had never done equipment and tarping or anything like that. I'd never been over the road as a flatbed driver. All my stuff was like local lumber and, housing goods and whatnot.
Yeah.
But called up, talked to recruiting at Kivi, and ended up hiring on, I think that was March of 2020. Yeah, March 20. So been here about 4 years now, or just over 4 years. Never really thought that I was going to make it into heavy haul or anything, and just kept working as hard as I could, and ended up, I think it was actually, there was a permit for a Barco mulcher that I had to apply for. And when I was applying for the, permit, we had a thing on all the permits at the time that you had to talk to Jeff Clausen, speak with him about your permit, make sure you understood what you were doing. And I called him up, and rest quickly became history. He wanted me to move over to heavy haul pretty quick, and came over. That would have been actually March 22. So it was basically 2 years to the date of hiring on. that I moved over to heavy haul, and still not really sure how I did it. I advanced very rapidly, obviously, to the point that I'm 2 years in heavy haul, and I'm obviously, I've done multi-axle now. I've run the Goldhofer, had a lot of very fortunate opportunities for myself that just came, I guess, through hard work and dedication to the job.
I was going to say, you have our respect. I mean, Jeff speaks high. Everyone in the heavy haul department has high regard. And that's the kind of people I look for, right? Especially to join this podcast to share how you did it.
Yeah.
And like you'd said, your story has you had to overcome a lot of adversity, from your surgery to not knowing where you're going through all the different channels. Like, why don't you tell us how that worked? And I know even just recently you had a little adversity to overcome. You mind telling us about that?
Yeah. So about a week ago, I was at work. Everything was fine. And I went home. And when I got home, I thought I was just, really cold. I thought I had like food poisoning because I started shaking pretty violently and I started throwing up. Turned out the next day that I had been basically unconscious for somewhere between 14 to 16 hours. And I had started hemorrhaging blood, which was kind of unexpected. Wife found me in bed and realized that I was in really bad shape. Took me over to Moose Lake, which is about 15 minutes from our house in Holyoke. And when we got there, they did a CT scan and checked my blood pressure and other vitals. I was sitting at, it was somewhere around like 73 over 40 something on my blood pressure.
Wow.
So not in good shape at all. They realized that my white blood cell count was at 40,000 when it should be like 5 or 6. So they immediately decided that I needed an ambulance ride to Duluth. Got to Duluth, still was kind of in shock. Like I didn't think anything like this, in my head, nothing this bad could be happening. Like it shouldn't have been a thing. I'd been perfectly healthy the day before at work. Like, I felt a little fatigued, but that was about it. And they came back, told me that some of the symptoms of my ulcerative colitis from years before my surgery, it flared back up and I had a blood-borne infection. So I ended up on IV antibiotics and steroids for about a week in the ICU and came back pretty quick. Vitals came back up, got back to having some energy again. And they just kept me on oral antibiotics and steroids coming out of the hospital. And I was able to return to work pretty quick with no restrictions. And I feel like I got very fortunate that I was at home when that happened.
I think we need to remind anyone listening, we're post 1 week of you, just over a week, right? Being out of essentially ICU. It's amazing to hear, of course, that you're doing well and we're happy for that, but that you're able to recover so quickly. And I think you obviously are very determined on your mindset, because you have to have a strong mind to go from feeling well, some cold shakes, thinking it's just possibly a flu, to next thing you know, you're in a state that you may not remember for a few hours, right? Like you said, kind of unconscious, to then get out and then pull it together and no restrictions, go back to work. Is there any special thing you do to have that resilience? Like,
I don't know if I have anything special about myself per se. I mean, I know I'm very driven as far as success is concerned. Like one thing I took away from the National Guard is a very key part of me now is just failure not being an option. Like that was really, really driven into me over and over when I was in the, National Guard, that the mission always comes first. And I've always kind of treated our job here in the heavy haul division and even in our general freight side that everything is something that has to be accomplished. We can't stop midway through a job and just give up. And I think I carry that in every day. I try to at least make sure that I'm putting forth at least 100%, if not more.
Well, and earlier you said you're unsure how you went from flatbed to heavy haul and how things progressed so quickly. Now you can kind of see, when you unpack it a little bit, that you have a determination to execute. No, failure is not an option, like you said. So when you think back to even the flatbed side, and I recall even when I was driving, there's plenty of adversity. You get to a shipper and they're like, especially on the flatbed, right? Like, we don't know how we're going to load it. Tell us how you want this loaded. And you have to sit back, kind of visualize this, piece it together, make sure it's within dimension, make sure it's legal weight, and get it done. So you just having that ability to just overcome and failure's not an option, and deliver that's something to be sought after. And you can kind of see how, you're able to scale up quickly, no matter what it is you do.
Yeah, it's definitely a quality that should be in high demand. I feel like, as far as, especially on the heavy haul side, with the time sensitive nature, of a lot of the stuff, especially on the local regional side, like a lot of equipment, there's an operator already on site waiting for it, and they have an expectation that you're going to show up and perform every single time, not let them down. I try to keep that in mind with every piece of equipment I move, that, there's money on the line for someone. Someone has something lined up. They need that machine to be there in a timely manner. They're already paying someone to be sitting there waiting for it.
Yep.
I try to make sure that I keep that in the back of my head every time I get out there.
I love hearing everyone's stories, because we've had people on this podcast that have come from the corporate world, and that helped frame their mind up of how to execute. We've had guests that were in shipping and manufacturing on the shipping side of their wherever they work, and it helped frame them up of what it means to have that integrity of, like, I'm going to show up, because I've been on the other end of it where people didn't show up, and it wasn't fun. It was painful. And in your case, National Guard helped instill that in you, and now it's like part of your DNA. That's how you operate, and it's how you're going to continue to operate.
Yeah. I know it drives the wife a little bit crazy, because like there's a lot of times that I'll be up, late at night and reviewing plans for the next day or the next couple of days, and, try to pre-file permits or do whatever we need to do to get stuff going. And, that over attention to detail, I know sometimes drives her up the wall a little bit, that she wishes I could unwind and, settle down a little bit, but, that's just part of
my wife would love for me to increase that side, attention to detail on the little things.
I think my wife would say that, I'm too attention, or driven to the fine details of work and not the things at home, and definitely need to keep working on that myself.
So you wanted to go into air traffic control. What attracted you to that? Because that is one of the most high stress jobs there is in the country, or maybe any job anywhere. Were you considering that when you were getting into it? Like, this is like where you were headed, this is going to be a challenge. And is that what attracted you to it as well?
So I wasn't actually planning on that. Originally, I actually thought about joining the Cav Scouts because my recruiter was a Cav Scout, and he talked that up and made it sound really cool.
So what does that entail? Tell us about that. What is that?
So Cav Scouts basically go seek out, as far as I understand, I never was with them as transportation. Their job is essentially to go seek out where enemy positions are, report back, and at times engage and, fight.
Mm-hmm.
The more I thought about that getting into the National Guard, the more I was like, that's kind of a silly choice. There's no real path forward with that outside the military. That would be any combat MOS. You're pretty much, stuck in a security contracting kind of gig after the military if you want to continue to utilize those skill sets. I had a background in aviation from growing up in rural Alaska when I was in my teens.
Wow.
So I was up there for right around 7 years, moved up there when I was 14 or turning 14. And I actually moved up to Palmer, Alaska, and decided to take the swing at moving to rural Alaska. So I moved out to the Aleutian Chain, or the beginning of the Aleutian Chain, southwest of Anchorage.
Yeah.
Spent several years in Naknek, Alaska, and Bristol Bay area.
Before you go any further, that's where the deadliest catch and all those crab fishing boats are, in that kind of area, right?
Yeah, a lot of it's in that area.
Dutch Harbor is kind of near the...
Yeah, when you think of all the wild caught salmon and whatnot that everyone thinks of being from Alaska, most of that's from Bristol Bay, Alaska. So I was right in the main area of where all the canneries were and everything.
Wow.
And at the time, I was actually working, I was 16 years old trying to do the job of a radio engineer, which I had no idea what I was doing. But, one of the things of rural Alaska, it doesn't matter if you have an actual qualification, as long as you can figure out how to do the job, someone will hire you.
Be self-sufficient, figure it out.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. So I took that on right away and did the best I could. Learned from a lot of other people that were way more talented than me to figure out actually how to do my job. That radio station was a Christian mission radio station, so they had a lot of outreach stuff in different villages and whatnot, and that afforded me the opportunity to fly pretty much weekly, if not bi-weekly, And when I joined the National Guard, I went and took the ASVAB, and I thought I was going to bomb the ASVAB. I thought I was going to do terrible, and I took it, really applied myself. And best advice I was given by my recruiter was take every single minute of the test. They give you about 4 or 5 hours, and really went through it, tried to do the best I could, and came back. And one of the jobs that popped right away with my score was being a 15 Quebec. And while it wasn't directly flying, it was still in the aviation field, being an air traffic controller. Took one look at that. I was like, wow, I know what air traffic controllers make outside the military. And I know it's a very good career. It's something I would be passionate about still. And jumped at that opportunity, which, a little bit to the dismay of my recruiter. He definitely wanted to see me in a combat MOS, thought that was the thing to do in the military. And I was like, no, air traffic control sounds, pretty legit. I could be making 6 figures outside the Guard pretty quick.
Yeah.
Transfer that over to the civilian world. And
So did you get to
Probably.
do any tours of the towers and kind of get a little taste of it before it didn't?
So I've been in a couple different air traffic control towers up in Alaska. I didn't do any leading up to that. I just went and I saw that on the list of available jobs, which air traffic control in the military, at least on the Army side, does not come up very often, from my understanding. So, second I saw that on the list, I was like, wow, we're taking that slot immediately. With or without a bonus, I don't care. Like, that's the coolest thing out there,
Yeah,
So,
that's awesome. I read a lot about military and specifically like Navy SEALs and pilots and all that. And it's one of the common themes you see is they're usually attracted to the hardest thing. It's not always because it pays the most or, after military life, like you were looking at, it's, hey, this is the hardest thing. I want to do the hardest thing out there and prove that I have the skill set, the mindset, physical ability to do it. And I mean, indirectly, it still sounds like you did that. Like you took the hard, like you weren't worried about how hard it was. Like, I'm going to master it. Kind of that no failure at all mindset again.
Yeah, I was kind of given a heads up. There were a couple people from AirCav out of St. Paul that had talked to me, and they really wanted to drive home the point of how difficult the training was, to actually pass. It's a lot of classroom time, and they take what's normally a couple year degree and they try to cram that into a very short window.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think the general thing is they want to weed out people they don't think will succeed in that, by giving the heads up before they ship out. And the more they told me how hard it was going to be, the more I was like, well, this sounds like a challenge that I want to take on. I don't want to go for the easiest MOS I can pack in on.
Yeah.
I feel like I kind of did that with trucking too. I sought out the hardest thing I could do in trucking, for the challenge.
Yeah. Well, look at you now. You're in a, specifically looking at wage, right? You're in a lucrative position now. You found a career and I love to tell people that trucking has a lot of opportunity, especially when you learn through the modes, right? You started in van, that helps solidify your over the road experience. No matter how you look at it, you gained that experience, which is very important. And then, like you said, you saw the challenge, local company to where you live, moved up the ladder. And now, you're moving big things. And like I said, you can take home big paydays.
Absolutely. Getting into trucking, it's changed my life entirely. And I don't just say that, to boost our company or anything. It took me from growing up well below the poverty level and growing up in a family where owning a home had skipped a generation in our family to I got into trucking, paid off crazy amount of debt that I had from that I'd accrued from my hospital bills and whatnot when I had my surgery back in 2019 to owning a home. I actually bought a home pretty much right after I transferred to heavy haul. That wasn't coincidental. It was, wasn't the extra pay of heavy haul or anything. It was just the hard work that we'd put in, me and Shelby, to get where we are. Wouldn't have been able to do that if I'd been in a different industry. The pay that I'd been able to achieve, through working in trucking really allowed us to move quickly on that. We went from me being very much in debt and not ready to buy a house to, I think we spent about a year cleaning things up and bought 40 acres in Holyoke right down the road from our yard. We're about 35 minutes away now.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's been amazing, honestly.
Great opportunity. And like I said, there's anyone that ever has the chance, there's unsure of what they want to do as far as a career, getting your class A, getting your CDL. And the good thing is even if somebody isn't sure, if they have the opportunity to gain that CDL, you can maintain it. It's not hard to keep it current. And if there ever is the time, if there's ever the time you need to use it or an opportunity presents itself, you're ready to go. And that's awesome. Yeah, you got a great story. I wish I would have known about the Alaska earlier. Probably would have spent a half hour on Alaska, because I've been to Alaska once trucking. That's the only time I've been up there. And it was winter. So it was January, went to Prudhoe Bay, got my experience in that. And it was cold and it was unique. And I've watched plenty of Deadliest Catch. That's one of my favorite shows. So I feel like, just right away attracted to that side of hearing those stories. So, man, you've had an awesome introduction there. Why don't we learn a little bit more about what's your favorite thing you've done trucking? Where's your favorite area to go?
So as far as favorite area to go, it'd probably be the Northwest. As far as just, if I'm going to take a trip out somewhere, the scenery is unbelievable. Like you, I've also made one trip up to Alaska trucking, hauled a load of snowmobile trailers up there right before getting into heavy haul. That's probably one of the highlight trips that I've ever had. Going up to Alaska is just unbelievable. I mean, it's a different world, trucking all the way through Yukon and whatnot. The fact that you can go literally half a day without ever seeing another vehicle in the wintertime is it's unreal, you know?
Yeah. Well, we had just recorded a podcast on trips to Alaska. So it's funny how it pops up, because it truly is, any driver has taken a trip up there, if they're from the lower 48, it's something they'll never forget. It's something I'll never forget. Been to a lot of places and I'll still never forget. And to your point, you highlighted it again. It's remarkable getting that opportunity.
Oh, it absolutely is. I don't know if it's for everyone, and I don't know if I would make the trip again, you know, right now, but that's just because family dynamics have changed and whatnot. Definitely the experience of a lifetime. I mean, that is very interesting, and like the level of self-reliance that you have to feel that you have, you know, to go up there and feel safe doing it. It's unlike anything down here in the lower 48. I mean, obviously you could be remote down here, but you know, you're not talking an entire day from having any help coming to you, you know, the fact that you can get snowed in on the road and have no one coming to help you, you know.
Yeah, it's
very different.
It's definitely a different feeling. What advice do you have for any driver that wants to move from flatbed to heavy haul, or even get into flatbed? Would it be just take the leap? Is there any like fears that you would have, or you see people have that are nervous?
I think a lot of people that I've talked to, if they do have any fear, it's a lot of it surrounds tarping. That seems to be the number one thing that everyone thinks they're going to be terrible at that.
Yeah.
And then a fear of just not being able to understand all the rules about securement. Honestly, if you go to a company, you know, such as Kivi or another training company that's willing to teach you load securement, I don't think you should have any fears of doing it. You should just dive in, you know. You need to be willing to commit to it and really be willing to learn, you know, and be open to the fact that you're probably going to make some mistakes at first, and every day is a new challenge. As far as moving, I mean, I would say this applies anywhere. It doesn't matter if it's truck driving or something else, but that part, you know, talking about having relationships with our customers, your integrity and your word is everything, you know, and I don't care like who you are, you're going to have mistakes, you know, you're going to break things, you're going to mess things up at times. And if you can't be honest about your mistakes and truthful about things that have happened out on the road, you're not going to advance anywhere you are in the industry, you know, whether it's trucking or something else. So my biggest piece of advice for anyone that wants to move up anywhere, no matter what industry they're in, is maintain your word. If you say you're going to do something, you do it. You show up when you say you're going to be there, you get the job done, you know, no matter what it takes. So
it's great advice. That's like you said, anywhere, having that, say what you're going to do what you say, like you follow through and deliver, and it pays dividends. And point in case, you know, you're a great representation of that. So specifically on the cargo securement side, like you'd said, because you had walked through that whole phase. For me, it's a little different. I grew up in it. So before I even could drive, I was able to help strap and chain and do the things.
Sure.
So it kind of was second nature. But you really get comfortable and it turns into second nature, I guess, right? Like you start to visualize what it's going to take. It gets relatively easy, you would say, right?
Yeah, I'd say it gets pretty quick, pretty easy, you know, over time. Obviously, I don't think anyone should get complacent in it. You know, I think you should always be doing the math. You know, once you get into, you know, securing equipment, there's stuff that's obvious. You can look at something and you know already what it weighs and what it's going to require for securement, you know, different machines and whatnot. But anytime you're doing something new, I always try to make sure everyone's running through the math, whether it's myself or someone that's a senior driver, you know, like.
Yeah. Helping out, using resources, asking, never be afraid to ask for help.
Yeah. And there's plenty of times I still call people all the time. You know, if I get something new and I have no idea what I'm doing with it, you know, I try not to, you know, get big headed about it and just be like, I can figure this out on my own every single time. If there's a resource, you know, I'm going to reach out now, someone who's already done it, you know, and get some advice, even, you know, if they might do it a little bit differently, it still helps to have that info up front.
Yeah. Well, when you're bigger, you stand out, and to point in case you pull into a scale or the DOT sees you, there's a good opportunity. They might want to check things out, and it's all the more reason to be extra cautious on overdo things, right? Have extra securement, never get complacent, like you said.
Absolutely.
There's things that you might have hauled this machine many times or this model, and that means I don't have to measure the height on this one. Well, that could be an opportunity for problem to happen, right? So always staying consistent, doing things to make sure that you're setting yourself up for success.
Yeah, I think that's extra important as we swap trailers and whatnot too. There's a lot of opportunity to get complacent where you think you know the height on something, you switch into a different trailer, or someone pulled your trailer before. On the heavy haul side, you know, with us having adjustable ride height and whatnot, it's very easy to have something be over height. You know, if someone else has been messing with the equipment, you know, before you pulled it, or like I said, you swapped into someone else's trailer, their deck height may be set higher or higher, or they might have a different trailer that's got a thicker deck. You're not thinking about that because you've done it 100 times. You definitely need to stay on top of that.
Yeah. Well, we've talked about the broad industry, how to move up, whether it's from van to flap. It doesn't matter what company you're at. Let's talk specifically here. What do you think is important for any driver to be successful at Kivi? And then specifically, if they have that ambition and that hunger to go into the harder, the bigger, the more challenging, what does it take to move into that heavy haul side? We kind of got your story, but let's hear just how you would frame it up for somebody if they were to do it in 15 seconds.
So if they're wanting to move up in heavy haul or move over to heavy haul, the biggest thing would be, not getting ahead of yourself. There's a lot of guys that they think they're going to come over and they're only going to haul the biggest stuff out there. They will always be on an RGN. They're always going to do what they want. A lot of coming into heavy haul is realizing that, especially for our company, we are servicing the needs of our customers. So it doesn't matter if they want to move a skid steer or a 308 excavator, if they want to move something tinier, they want to move the world, if they want to move the biggest things out there. I try never to refuse a load, unless it's like just a conflict where I've got something going on, and need accommodation there. See a lot of people that don't, and they want to turn stuff down because it doesn't interest them. And they want to get frustrated about, stuff not always going their way. And the fastest way to shut yourself down as far as moving up would be to have that kind of an attitude. The other biggest thing just falls back to integrity. Like, you've got to be willing to do the right thing even when no one's looking. And I feel like there's a lot of people who have tried to move into heavy haul or tried to move up in heavy haul, and they've tripped themselves up on that. And that's a really unfortunate thing, and it's always kind of rough for someone to make that leap and then put themselves in a bind because they were doing the wrong thing, or they didn't quite give the full detail on a story, for something that went wrong. Unfortunately, things do go wrong. And if you can't be honest about it, I kind of harp on that all the time because I feel like that's the most important thing anywhere. If you get the wrong attitude, it's not going to happen, unfortunately. And most of what we do for our customers is about having good customer service and a good attitude, even when it's not our favorite thing in the world, or it's, the little things that should be really easy, but get really hard for no reason. We get a lot of that in heavy haul, where something that should be a seemingly, simple task that's going to take, an hour, 2 hours to do turns into an all day event. And you got to have a lot of patience with that. The waiting around part for some people with permits and whatnot or escorts can be a real challenge, where they're tripping themselves up there to getting too antsy about it.
Wow. You've had a lot of great advice, and I think there's a lot more that you could share. And I really like the concept that I've heard a lot with integrity, which is it's not how you do things when everyone's watching. It's how you do them when no one's watching. And I think that you embody that. And it's been a real pleasure speaking with you, Aidan. And I really hope to talk with you again in the future because I want to learn more about your Alaska time and all the other tips that you have. So I just want to say thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, Tyler.
That's it for this episode of Keep Trucking Personal. Please tune in next week for a great episode. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Keep Trucking Personal. We appreciate you taking the time to explore the heart and soul of Kivi Brothers Trucking with us. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review to let us know your thoughts. Tune in next time as we continue our journey together, diving deeper into what makes us a community, a catalyst for positive change, and a home for those who aspire to be part of something truly extraordinary. Until then, keep trucking, and we'll catch you on the next episode.